Good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Dr. Michelle Stewart, the proud principal of Druid Hills High School. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you to the parents that joined the tour today to get a feel of what Druid Hills looks like and feels like right now. So you have some comparison when you look at the diagrams and the proposals. I know most of you is the first time you've ever stepped foot in this building, so I appreciate you coming. We're on meeting 3 of 3, and I'm going to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Horton.
All right. Let's give Dr. Stewart a hand. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming out tonight. We know this is a critical meeting or critical conversation. I just want to clarify a few things, so I told the team I would like to speak first. And before I even do that, let's introduce, we have our board members here. We have our Vice Chair, Ms. Pierce. Your district rep, Ms. McGinnis. And board member, Ms. Gevertz. We have past board member, Mr. Marshall Orson. I wanted to take this moment to address a couple of things. The last meeting we had in the month of October, there was really good feedback. Contrary to what some may believe, we do listen, we do hear, and we do make adjustments. And so a couple of things I want to be clear on with you all. Number one is, and want to bring some clarity to, when it comes to the actual special the IB program, this process that we're going through right now does not have the responsibility or the authority to change programming. This is about the facility. It started off as modernization, and it seems to be growing, rightfully so, because in the end, our goal, along with our board, is to provide the best academic facility for our students of this community. And we know that the current structure is not the best structure for that. And so we're gonna have a conversation today and engage in some other things. So that's first. That doesn't mean that student assignment planning, which is a larger scale, if you're a part of the student assignment planning committee, can you raise your hand if you're part of that in here tonight? Okay, so those who are, you can talk to them. Raise your hand again so they can see you. Yeah, I always give them, come on, man. No, I think it's important to know the difference, right? This is about the facility. We're not promising that IB would not be touched. This is facility only, right? And so that's important. The second piece is that I wanted to reiterate is that we have not landed on a decision. I understand that the concern about the relationship between the district and trust, right? I know change happens at the speed of trust. There's been some challenges in the past, and we want you to know that we are really taking every single piece of feedback, spending hours and hours on just a couple of thoughts, trying to process and make it make sense. So there's no decisions made. You're gonna see that today. We heard you, we got feedback that we felt made it appear as if we took a position. We have not. We are very open to really doing what's right. And the numbers will tell you what it would cost, that some of the ideas or some of the positioning, it just don't make sense. The other thing I would like to address, which is something that at last month we were at this point, but we've reflected, and we're working with some realty companies anyway, and we're looking at every single option. So there will be some exploration of some other opportunities. We will explore that. We will see what's reasonable. We know that there's the conversation about purchasing land, homes, churches, all of that. We would like to just explore just to see what it looks like. That doesn't mean that we will land there. It's a part of our process, right? Lastly, please make sure that you know, like, this is not we're having all of these sessions. I'm going to go back to this. We're not having all of these sessions so that we can already in the back room got a decision made. I got to go back to that. We do not. We are really being open, and we're excited to have many of our families. If you are a family that's stepping foot inside of Druid Hills for the first time, raise your hand. Let's give them a hand. Thank you, Doc, for bringing the families in who will probably have everyone's going to be impacted by the decision that we make, but definitely we know your children and your students will be attending whatever we design. So this is a think tank, and you're going to hear a few things from us multiple times tonight. You're going to hear it from me once, then you're going to hear from Chief Hofstetter probably 4 or 5, and you're going to hear from Ms. Smith 4 or 5, because we want to make sure we iterate when you walk away that our messaging is crystal clear and it's the same. So again, this is an opportunity for us to engage and share decisions. This is not an easy undertaking, as you all know. There's a lot in the decisions that we make. The decisions that we make will influence how we finance this, what we take back to our board. And again, for me as a superintendent, I have to look at all of this from this whole perspective and say, all right, this makes sense. I'm going to bring this forward to the board, and the board will be having to vote on this. Right? This is a process that takes all of us, right, to be on the same page. So without further ado, I want to bring up our COO, he's the hardest working man in the DeKalb County Schools. So yeah, yes, you are. You really are. You saw the board meeting last week. Were you there? I think you were. All right, Chief Hofstetter, come on up.
Thank you, Dr. Horton. Actually, this is the hardest working man in our school system right now, and he works very hard for the children and the family. So please give it up for Dr. Horton, because he's nonstop. I can't keep up with him at all. Oh, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining the conversation. Just a quick show of hands. If this is your first time joining us, just kind of give me a hand there. Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, thank you. It's always good to hear from more voices and new faces and new voices, so it's great to meet you. As we have been doing here in all our presentations, we like to just kind of know how we got where we are, and we're going to recap that. Then we're going to go over, based on the feedback we've received so far, all right, we're going to go over there, and we're going to try to keep this conversation discussed, right? And we're going to keep moving. You heard Dr. Horton say earlier, this is meeting 3 of 3. Now, we scheduled 3 meetings just for the sake of scheduling over time, so everyone knows, but we are never stopping at those 3. We're going to go as long as we need to get this right, okay? So we will be looking at scheduling more meetings, maybe after the holidays, but we'll see. But based on all the feedback we get, because we want to continue to talk, and we want to continue to try to figure out what's in the best interests of this community, okay? So a couple things. We started in September 23rd. That's when we just kind of announced everything with our architect team, who did a full assessment on the modernization project. Now, you might recall that the current directive, right, what the board has approved back in 2022, was a modernization, a Georgia Department of Education modernization program for Druid Hills High School, okay? And we discussed quite a bit of what goes on in that. Basically, what we're trying to do with modernization is bring the building up to contemporary standards, both in a code, right, fire code sense, ADA, as well as our own standards here in the DeKalb County School District. We came back in October 21st, and we had another large crowd here, which was great, and we broke off into groups, and we, Ms. Smith, our Executive Director of Student Assignment Planning, she did an excellent job, and we were very happy. We actually got some really profound feedback, and we're going to share that with you tonight. So again, we thank you for that. It's extremely helpful. We also talked to the faculty here at Druid Hills High School on October 23rd, because it's always good to get the staff perspective, right? They're the ones who are here all the time, and more than half of them have been here longer than any of us. And some have been up here almost 30 years. So their insight and the future of insight, right, is also a very valid perspective. And we look forward to talking to them again. And then here we are at November 18th community meeting. So again, 3 of 3. We are looking at probably coming back and scheduling more, not just here at Druid Hills High School, but we're also looking at going to elementary schools and the feeder programs and the middle schools. We're also looking at potentially just doing an all virtual, right, an all virtual meeting with interactive feedback. All right, so with interactive feedback, if you've been with us before, you know the drill. We like to use your cell phones here. So if you take your cell phone out and give us a QR code, we want to know who we're talking to. And if you type that in, if you don't get the QR code, you can simply go to www.slido.com. That's www.slido.com. And if you type in code 329-4136, you're going to find some questions there. And there's no right or wrong answer. We just want honest feedback. And there is no personal information being done. And if I recall right, which best describes you? Who are you representing here tonight? All right. And just so you know, we actually do get your feedback. We like to go ahead and show it, and you'll see the numbers go as people plug in and submit. And obviously, it looks like we got quite a few parents here, and that's a great thing, right? That's a great thing. Okay? All right, and we'll keep going there. Please sign that in. We'll come back and revisit these questions. And then we asked if you're a parent of a DCSD student, which school do you most associate with currently right now? All right. And you may have more than one, so you get to pick which one you want to do here. And we'll see where our parents are coming from. And if you're familiar with word clouds, the bigger the letters, the more people, right? And I think that's how it works. I'll let that go here for a minute. Wow. Nice. I see we got Druid Hills Middle School representing tonight. All right. Quite a few of our elementary schools. Very good. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us. We'll go ahead and hit it back here. And I'm going to introduce Miss Sarita Smith. She's going to take you through where we are and take us through tonight's exercise. Okay. Thank you.
Hello. So I want to reiterate something Dr. Horton said. Really, my purpose in engaging with this is to help Mr. Hofstadter's team get actual feedback from the community and embed it into their process. Even though this is not necessarily a SAP process, anytime we're talking about buildings, boundaries, or programs, you'll probably hear SAP, and they'll probably want me involved in some way, so we can also connect whatever happens in this process back to the larger scale process that we're doing across the district. So just wanted to reiterate that. So what I came and helped with on the 21st was just to gather some feedback. The process was a little complex, but we did get some really good data, and we did aggregate that and are here to share that with you guys today. And then he also explained that we did do something similar with the DeKalb staff and faculty, and then a similar, central as well. We're going to take some of that information and ask for your feedback again tonight in a less complex process. Oh, wrong way. So something we heard pretty loud and clear was challenges around the sports and athletic fields and facilities here at Druid Hills. There was a lot of feedback around literally just going somewhere else to do all of it because of how complex it is and how limited the space is here. Talked about double decks for parking on the site. We heard a lot of, probably overwhelmingly, the modernization with more capacity on this site. So building extra classrooms in the, like vertically, because we know going out may be a little bit complex. Heard again about exploring using other land and or buying or purchasing that, and especially making sure that we can get some support for our sanitation to be out of the building and around the perimeter. And then heard about, there was also some mention of like just a full construction project. Scrap this, do the whole building, like start over, we need a full project. Talked about tearing down the elementary portion of the building and again, expanding up to accommodate more students. And then again, mentioning of buying extra space so we could possibly accommodate. So all this to say that the ideas are kind of across the board from community members, but what we did here probably more is modernize on the site, but build up to add more capacity. Heard that pretty loud and clear. There was also mention of swapping the middle and high school. Heard that this has been a conversation over and over, and that at the middle school site that it was originally a high school and could possibly serve high school students. Heard that in the feedback. Obviously for some of those reasons. There was a lot of information about keeping the building that we're currently in, the 1927 building, but maybe doing something different around the property, but not, and making sure that we preserve this portion. There was a really interesting note about maybe moving ninth graders out and maybe going somewhere else, but then that way you limit some of the capacity and don't have to really shift as many students around. So that was an interesting one that came up. And then a little bit about parking and how we can maximize that on the grounds here. So that came out of the Trigo Egg session, and I believe I'm handing it over to Mr. Ball to talk about the faculty information.
Thank you. Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Keith Ball. I'm the Executive Director for Capital Improvements and Facilities, and one of the things I've been tasked with is really to help the team analyze and kind of compare and contrast the different series of feedback that we've got. So we thought one of the simplest ways that we can do that is to kind of overlay and put them right next to each other. So we can show you the feedback from September, from October with the community, and then also in October the feedback that we got from the staff. So this one, just to give you some context, when you see the little box numbers up in gray, the 053 and the 054, that just means how many participants there are that participated within each of the feedback sessions, similar to what you saw when you were putting in your association with your kiddos school. One of the things that we also asked, obviously the staff, was anybody obviously a graduate of that school, and how long that they had worked there. Hello? Check it. How about now? How about now? How about now? All right, teacher voice it is, or it came back on. We didn't want that to happen, did we? All right, I won't go any farther than the line of demarcation here. Moving right along past the staff. So what we made sure we put in is which session did the feedback come from, and that's what you'll see on the next couple of slides, which is the red box on the bottom. So specifically, this was from the 23rd, again, 45 participants, and we asked them to rank in priority order more classrooms, athletic field space, and parking. That was precipitated from what happened in the first session in saying, hey, what do you call an adequate high school? And we talked about more parking, more classrooms, field space, open areas. So we're trying to, again, walk everyone through and kind of compare and contrast what was happening in the first session, what was happening in feedback from the staff, and then what did we get in the second session with the community. And you could see the kind of percentages of where everyone fell. This one is fascinating because we wanted to make sure you saw what the staff was saying, which is on the bottom right, what the staff was saying on the upper left, specific, yeah, I did go in the wrong direction. Thank you, buddy. You're the man. That's not paid help, but that's much appreciated. On the right is the high school required for a gym, and then also on the left from the faculty, the same type of question. And you could tell that the responses were about the same. So 923 community feedback on your right, my left, and then the staff feedback in the upper left-hand corner. And you can see where they kind of fell. See if I can go the right direction this time. How about that? All right. The next centered on the auditorium, which was a big piece of the puzzle that came out from our first meeting. And again, on the left, or your right, which is what the community was said on the 23rd, and then what the staff was saying on the 23rd of October when we came out here to Druid Hills High School and met with the staff during the faculty meeting. Again, participants, it wasn't exceptionally high. We had about 40 folks participate the first time, and then we had 48 staff members participate in the survey. Again, about on par, 98% and 92%. This was specific to the track and field. Again, one of the priorities or one of the suggestions that came up in the first meeting, like what do we do with that space? Do we maximize that area? Is it a priority? You could see the staff. This is the first time you're going to see a little bit of a gap in the opinion and the feedback from what the staff gave us versus what the community feedback gave us. There was a lot of conversation from the staff, particularly the coaches, about what it takes to coach a team for practice, to coach a team from a sport and constantly be going to another school ultimately to do that. So you probably see that reflected in the numbers here. All right, we made it through. Chief, I think this is yours. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Appreciate it. Great job here. All right, so yeah, some interesting data points. And again, these are just data points. Just kind of helps us look in that direction and try to figure out, again, now, what do we want as a community, right, in a high school? There was another question that came up based on the feedback about a deed, that there's a deed on this property, and that if it's not used as a school, it all goes back to Emory. That's partially true, and that's what I want to clear up today. This is from the actual deed itself, and you can see the old school typewriting, which is kind of cool, but way back in 1928 and then in 1950. And really the only part of the deed is the back part of the field as it goes by the railroad tracks. So if you take the railroad tracks and you come out 150 feet into the field back there, so it's right about midfield, that's the only piece that's on the deed. Everything from there up to this point, there's no deed on this property here. So whatever construction takes place, done, okay? So we're free and clear on that. There's just kind of the diagram. Again, this is from the deed itself. So we just wanted to clear up because, well, we heard quite a bit of feedback from that. And that's in the actual documents themselves, okay? All right. Boom. So we're going to continue on and try to get some more feedback here, and we're going to keep going back and forth. But in order to do that, we got a couple of guiding principles, and that helps us frame the kind of feedback we're looking for, okay? Of course, we'll listen to anything that you have for us, but in order to move this conversation forward about the building and the facility itself, right, that's what we're looking at is the brick and mortars. There's a couple things that we just want to keep in mind. And again, this is just where we are currently. All of this is subject to growth and change over time as the conversation progresses. But up until this point, obviously we want to consider all the community feedback and all the staff feedback, but we do so in a district-wide lens, all right? We have to look at how it impacts all the other surrounding schools, including this school, right, and this facility. So that's how we use the feedback. Obviously, our plating right now only includes the property owned by DCSD. Again, we don't have any current intentions of acquiring more. However, that doesn't mean that we're not open to go and researching to see what is available. Okay, so that is a very recent thing that we're going to continue to work on just to see what is possible about some of the surrounding property here at this site. Okay. Our third one there, as you can see, modernization. What modernization is it brings our existing structures up to that modern code, right? And up to our contemporary standards. But it's important to keep in mind that these walls here, they're not moving. The hallways are the hallways, right? They're not going to get bigger or wider, because when we start doing that, when we start messing with the structural integrity of the actual building. All right, so we just want to clear up really any expectations of what it may look like. Now, that being said, obviously new paints and floors, it'll have much more of a modern feel, but the actual physical layout of the classrooms, of the hallways, of the stairwells, very little to no change there, okay? And that's part of modernization. If you were on the tour, you may have seen that we do have to, in order to get modernization, in order to get a permit, we do have to move a section at least of the gymnasium, and that might have been explained to you on the tour. So if that is removed, we do need, and our plan is to rebuild that somewhere else on the property, all right? Because as everyone has said, it's important to have a gym at a high school campus, all right? So these are some of the guiding principles. The physical site right now, all right, it is currently planned to stay an instructional facility, all right? Because based on the feedback we've heard about, do we stay here, or do we swap, or all this kind of stuff, regardless of that, this building here, the tensions we need to keep as it's some type of instructional facility, okay? So that being said, if we're going to put children and staff in here of any age, we still need to clean this place up because it deserves it, the mechanical systems and everything else, all right? So understand that whatever we do, we still need to touch this building, okay? And then, just as it was said earlier, our student assignment planning, okay, that's going to continue to happen across the school district, all right? But really what this program here is, we're specifically talking about the physical building and the needs for that physical building. And that's what we're asking for your feedback from, okay? So we use these as kind of a guiding principle through a district-wide lens, all right, in order to kind of arrive at a decision, all right? And we'll arrive at that decision when we feel we all have enough of the data to make an informed decision, all right? So that's where we're at there. All right, let's just recap, because this is really important. From the first slide, and also if you go on the website, on our capital improvement website, you have a whole Druid Hills High School Modernization Program link with all of our data on there, all the recordings, and the architect's assessment. It's about 195 pages, give or take. Has lots of pictures, lots of diagrams, so people know what it is we're talking about. But there was 10 things that must happen on this facility in order for it to be modernized. But the important thing to know is, in order to get a permit, some of these have to be done regardless, or we cannot do a whole lot of anything here, all right? And that's how building tends to work. So the first one is emergency vehicle access to the site, all right? The 4 that are in red are very critical, and they have to be done, we know that. And if you did the tour, you've probably seen where that gym kind of goes over top of property that's adjacent that we really don't own, but we have an easement with them. But that does not meet modern code, so we need at least about 26 feet between the property lines, is that right? As a setback, 26 feet. And we got 11? 12, 11 or 12. So we obviously have to increase that, but we have a building in the way. You've seen that. And the reason why is we got to be able to get a fire truck and everything else back behind the building. Now, it's important to note that we are currently compliant with all laws, okay? We're currently compliant. Contemporary standards, we're just trying to make things more accessible, okay? But it's important to know that we are currently in compliance with all life safety code as it stands, all right? Site accessibility, if you walked, you know that there's 9 different elevations between stairs, climbing the mountains and the hills and everything else, all right? And then we need to make it more ADA accessible. It is currently compliant with ADA code as when the building stands. But when we go to modernize, we have to bring it to the more accessible modern codes. And we've identified well over 14 areas, I think, might be more than that, if I remember right, that we need to address and make this more accommodating. Again, security, if you've been around and you walk the campus, you know that it's kind of wide open, sits next to a major university, lots of walk-through traffic, and it has a lot of detached buildings. All right, so one of the things we'd like to do is some enclosed corridors, all right, that type of thing, single points of entry, try to make things a little bit safer within the building for security reasons. And then our service access for the kitchen. If you walk by and you saw where the garbage and the loading dock, we got to actually load that up on a gator, right, or a golf cart, and move all the trash back up to the front, because we cannot get a garbage truck back there. All right, not only can we not get it back there, then we have a 30-foot incline that it can't climb. All right, so we got some challenges there that have to be fixed. Everything else there that you see would be normal, which you would think in a renovation or modernization. Things such as HVAC, roofing, window systems, all the other systems that are within the school, all the plumbing, all the pipes. We know this building was constructed in 1927, which means a lot of the underground piping was also constructed during that time. So all that has to be assessed and replaced where need be, all right? So that it's just important to reiterate that, because that's why we're here, is when we look at this and how to address those, it becomes a very, it's a little bit more challenging, okay? And then how do we want to approach it at the best use of taxpayers' money? So based on all the feedback, we decided we're going to come back and just kind of offer up 3 scenarios. We're going to go in depth on this, and this is where we're going to want your feedback on, right? You're not going to be asked to rank or prioritize or anything like that. We just want your feedback on what these might mean in your opinion, okay, in your viewpoint. The 3 scenarios, we can modernize and bring up everything up to code like has been presented since the first meeting and what the original project currently stands. Scenario 2, because we heard about we need to increase more classroom space because of the amount of children here, it includes the same thing. So we would modernize and look at building an addition of a certain number of classrooms in order to get to around 1,600 students, because that's what the feedback told us. All right? And in scenario 3, we're going to go ahead and just kind of talk a little bit about what if we move Druid Hills High School, the operation of it, to an alternate location, and what does that look like? Again, these are the 3 scenarios based on the feedback we received so far. Now, a couple of things about cost. The modernization, we're looking, and this is an approximate estimate at this time, with the cleaning up of the school, the HVAC, and having to rebuild a gym, the cafeteria and all that to bring it up to standards, adding the spine, and again, we're going to go a little bit more in depth. We're looking at a minimum around $80 million, but that does not include things such as phasing, planning, swing space, so it could well reach an additional 20 million above that, and that's where you might hear this 80 to 100 million, right? So once we get the scope, that's where we're going to try to stay, and that's a very realistic number in today's construction world. Scenario 2, obviously you have the modernization piece of 80 million, but if we create more classroom space, and again, we have to do a little more math on this, but you're probably pushing somewhere around the 80 plus the 20 million, right, to do phasing and all that, plus another 25 to construct additional classrooms. It's important to note under DOE specifications, when you add classrooms, you also have to make sure that your cafeteria is large enough, that your media center is large enough. And I think we've identified going to 1,600, we would then have to expand the media center or the library. So we would have to add additional square feet onto that somehow, okay? Additional bathrooms and all the other things that go on with that, all right? So again, we're estimating somewhere around 125 million, okay? That's a very high level, rough order estimate at this time. And in scenario number 3, depending on where you go, if you have a nice flat piece of land with nothing there, could be a little less. If we're looking at converting a school or swapping a school, it may need to be brought up to high school contemporary standards, which could involve construction. It could be anywhere up to $200 million to build a 1,600 FTE high school. We're looking right about 175, 180, but we need to just plan for that as we build just in case. So that's why we say kind of an up to 200 million. All right, so you can kind of see the progression. And again, what we're trying to all work through and what we do here and in our government, right, is how do we make decisions to get what we want with the resources we have? And that's where it becomes very challenging. What's the best use of taxpayers' money in order to run Druid Hills High School? And there's a lot of ways we can go about that, right? So it's kind of a value statement, and that's exactly what we're asking for feedback on. All right? So those are the 3 scenarios that we're going to go in depth. You're going to hit that one? Yep. All right. Scenario 1 we talked about already. If you haven't seen it, we can go again. Who's doing it? All right. We've seen this slide. So scenario number 1, it addresses everything that and again, this is the current approved project at this time in order to move forward. In other words, that's a directive we've been asked to plan at this point. All right. There's your plan, and you can see where we had our different the different layouts with increased parking. You still will not be able to get athletic fields on here. Without any additional current land, it's mathematically impossible to get a full-size track onto this campus along with everything else, okay? But you can see where we've increased adding a building, what we call a spine, and that will help with the security. Obviously, we're looking at moving the gym from back over here, and we're looking at building it here along with a cafeteria. So it's kind of a cafeteria on the bottom, or no, gym on the bottom, cafeteria on top, one of those. All right, so it's kind of a stacked building. All right, there's a circulation spine that we would have, and what that does is it helps connect the buildings together, helps obviously with security, promotes security, but it also brings us to 4 elevations, if I remember correctly. So we're cutting the 9 elevations here to 4. All right, and there it is, okay. We're looking at adding the music pavilion. Back here, we're kind of right here in the theater. We're looking at rebuilding that, like what we call a band music pavilion. And again, then you have your gym and your cafeteria up here, visual arts, and then, of course, administration as well. So we kind of consolidate the building into one contiguous building. And then the rest of it all gets modernized on the inside and on the outside, okay? Again, we increase our drop-off points. For those of you who've been in the traffic here, you probably understand what I'm saying. It also allows us to get to the back of the school and address all the emergency access, but also address the sanitation for the cafeteria and a number of other things, increased parking. So this is a conceptual layout design from the math that we feel we can make happen. We can always add more parking, and then you would just have less field space and things like that, right? But this kind of gives you an idea of what can happen here, okay? All right. All right, and you can see more of that. Same idea we talked about. Kind of the look and the feel, what we mean by like some of these little courtyard areas here where we can bring the outside in, make it more secure, more usable. And again, this is built to a 1,200 FTE, which the current school is a 1,200 FTE capacity, but it's been operating now at 1,450 for a couple of years. So, again, capacity is more or less a range. It's just the DOE standard of how they measure capacity. Okay? All right. And that's kind of a breakdown of how we arrive at that 80 million. Kind of see it for yourself there. Again, all this is on the website multiple times. You're looking around 40 million just for the modernization of the existing buildings, and then anything that's new constructed, right? So between adding all that up, we're right around that 80 million mark, and that includes about 12 million just for site work. What, again, it doesn't include is what do we do with the children during the time? How do we phase it in and still operate as a school? So there's a lot more to be looked at there. That's where we get that 80 to 100 million number, okay? All right. Scenario 2. I think we'll present this one now. So scenario 2, again, modernization with a classroom addition. Do we want to take questions? We could take one or two. How's that? And then we'll keep moving.
Get off scenario 1. I just want to make sure I understand. Scenario 1 is done. It is for 1,200 capacity school. Currently, the school is at 1,400 capacity. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yes. So the current school is a 1,200 FTE school, right? It's 1,200 capacity. I'm sorry, that's a good question. I should have qualified that. Full-time equivalent, or how many children it's designed for according to DOE standards. And just a quick rundown how that works. So you take a number of classrooms based on the minimum square footage that the Georgia Department of Education says is a high school classroom. All right, and it's roughly about 19 students per classroom is how they measure it. All right, but we know many schools have a higher than 19 kids per classroom. So that's why it's kind of a range. The FTE that we use for architects and for DOE standards is based for funding purposes. All right, so that's why we say a lot of times it's a range, and there's a lot of things that go into that, those variables. And I think we've been dealing a lot of that in the student assignment planning process about how that capacity is measured. Great question. Okay, yes, ma'am.
How many instructional units are there in each of the 3 scenarios? What is the assumption?
There's
60.
64 in the 1,200.
Right. Yep.
What about scenario 2?
We're going to get to that in just a moment of how many that adds. Yep. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. One more. We'll move on. Yep.
Speaking of ranges, thank you for outlining the cost, but I think another really helpful data point would be estimated timeframe to execute this.
That's correct. Yep. And that's something that when we get to what we know what we're doing, we would work with the contractor to phase this out because obviously we're going to have to build why it operates. So it's going to be a little bit slower. There's certain things we just can't do while students are here. So we have to calculate that into breaks and things of that nature and still be able to run that school and run it safely. Okay? Great questions. All right. With that, we'll go to scenario 2. And I'm going to bring up Mr. John from PBK Architects, right?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. There you go.
Thanks, Eric. Well, after the last meeting, about a month ago, The question came up, and I think a very good question from the community, is what does the scenario look like, to modernize and plan for growth at this facility on this site? Oh, this is, okay. This is counterintuitive. Okay. So if we're going to go to 1,600 students, when we followed the Department of Education guidelines, it adds about 20 instructional units, about 20 classrooms, from 64 to 84. And that's very straightforward. But what we've also looked at is that there are other parts of the school that have to grow proportionally, with the school. It's not just classrooms. And so we're going to go into a little more detail with that. And another aspect of this is that if we were doing a new school for 1,600 students, it would be well over 20 acres for the site that we would look for. This site is 12 acres. And it's 12 acres with very limited access. It's only from Haygood. There's a lot of topographical change. So these are all factors that make the site less efficient. It's 12 acres and a kind of a difficult 12 acres to work with. So, anytime we're looking at building footprint and building area, we've got a trade-off between how much land is left over, to use on the site for parking, for athletic fields, for outdoor learning, for any of these things. And so this was a chart we put together. And so we've got several columns here. We've got the FTEs, which is the number of students. And these were different scenarios. So the bright red numbers, or the bold red numbers, are the current conditions and where they fall in the chart. The green numbers across the bottom are the 1,600 student scenario. And so this was one way of gauging how much expansion is required. It'd be 20 instructional units or classrooms. The total square footage goes up quite a bit. The cafeteria has to get a couple of thousand square feet bigger. That's not a really critical change, because even in the 1,200 student scenario, we're replacing the cafeteria. So the new cafeteria has to be a little bit bigger. That's not as big a deal. So the media center is just about 1,000 square feet bigger that it needs to grow. But one aspect of that is that in the first scheme, we were looking at trying to be efficient with the existing facility, trying to reuse what we can of the existing facility. And so the existing one was big enough for 1,200 students. But when we go to 1,600, it's not big enough anymore. And it occurs in a place where it's difficult to add to it. It's difficult to make it incrementally bigger. So we think if we go to 1,600 students, that's another part of the building that we need to tear down and replace. Oh, I'm sorry, I went backwards again. Okay, so I think I've already covered these things, but these are the series of things we're looking at for making bigger. Another aspect is this auditorium. This is a beautiful auditorium, but it's on the small side for a high school. We know that the schemes we've been looking at would rehabilitate the auditorium, would really bring it back into like new condition. It would be a wonderful thing. But it's still a bit of a limiting factor. And so if it's a little bit limiting for 1,200 students, it's going to be more limiting for 1,600 students. And then if we were to look at replacing something like this, that gets into a significantly bigger expense. And it also gets into historic preservation issues, because this is a historically significant building. This space is one of the character-defining features of this historic building. And it's something that doesn't really lend itself to using for something other than an auditorium, or using efficiently. So the scenarios we've been looking at, all of them, they still keep this as an auditorium, but it would be something that we would live with as a slightly small facility. Okay, and my colleague Josh Andrews from Lord Sargent will go into more of the site planning and the building configuration.
Thanks, John. So just a quick recap, just to sort of understand a little bit more graphically some of the differences between the two scenarios that we're talking about here. So here's our existing conditions. You see the red dot up there. That's the building we're in now. That's where we're seated and where the auditorium is. And you'll sort of just get a sense of, the overall, site that we have here to play with. There's a limited amount of site to play with here. Here is just sort of looking at it as a model, and this is all the existing buildings that are here currently. One of the things that's really hard to understand, unless you all have started to walk around and see this, is that how much grade change there really is from front to back across the site. And so this shows a section right here at the bottom that sort of shows how the site works in general. That's over 30 feet of grade change that falls across the site, so you work to the back. And I'll just tell you, one of the things that we think is really important when you start to look at any kind of existing facility like this and existing conditions is where are the unique opportunities that are here? So we've talked a lot about modernization, and that's really important for the kind of things we're trying to do. But I want to share, this can be an amazing facility that's here. Like there's, and so when we look at these kinds of things, we look at what are the things that you need to really address, opportunities where things could be much better with some renovation. Look at areas that, they're really not great space, and we need to get rid of them. And where are these opportunities for doing something that could be really special on this side? So as we sort of looked at this, you all may have seen some of these in the past, these areas in red are places we've said, these really are not the best spaces on campus. These are opportunities that if we got rid of them, we could really do something special here. The other spaces that are left over could be renovated at a high level to be some really great space after that. So this is looking at the 1,200 FTE type scenario. Now, to be completely fair, we haven't really looked at the 1,600 enough yet to really understand all of the issues that might be there. But here is one, as John sort of highlighted before, is that there is where the media center is currently and where we would need to really, we think, probably get rid of that, because anywhere we're looking at a small footprint, you sort of think almost like an urban context of where you need to go multiple stories, so you sort of minimize the amount of footprint the building has on the site, so we have more room to do other things, for athletic opportunities or parking or those things like that. So anywhere we have sort of one-story buildings on the site, not the best use of land, So that's where we need to really have things that go taller. So in this case, where the media center is, and sort of John highlighted, it's in sort of the knuckle of the building, so it's sort of a tight spot to be able to do something really important in that location. So we think that probably goes away at that point. Okay, so here is the scheme we saw in scheme 1 that shows the 1,200 FTE. This gives you a little bit better sense of this notion of this circulation spine through the middle of the campus. This is meant to really negotiate all of those different grade changes that we have across the site to help try to create some unity and try to provide some cohesiveness across the entire site. So we think this is a good solution to be able to try to do that, and those brown boxes are where we start to look at the new program that would start to find its way into the project. And it solves a lot of other kinds of issues around loading utilities, and it shows this kind of music pavilion that would be on the rear of this facility to make some of those kinds of connections. All right, so if we look at the idea of adding more space to go up to the 1,600 FTE, this just gives you a rough order of magnitude of about the scale of what that additional space might be there, okay? So this adds about plus or minus 60,000 more square feet to this facility. We don't know exactly where that all goes yet, how that all fits into this overall context, where there's another level, how something might fit into that joint of where the media center was, or maybe some other scheme that might help to solve it. The main thing here to say is that when we're looking at stuff like this, you want to look at where the portions of this facility that really could be great space, and then where do we add new things on here to really make this a phenomenal facility. So this just sort of just gives you a sense of order of magnitude of how much more we need to be added on here, and more need to be studied to figure exactly where that might go. And it might alter some of the thoughts that are on here as you start to develop it further. This is just a little bit more about just sharing a little bit more about the cost of what we were just looking at before.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. So it kind of gives you right now, just still a very rough conceptual idea of what can be and what it takes to add enough what we call instructional units or classrooms in order to get to that 1,600 capacity. We'll take a few questions. Yes, sir.
Couple of questions for you. Okay. I want to try to save you 20 minutes too, but I think some clarity is needed, because I saw the 60,000 addition square feet, but some of that's already represented in this, because if I saw your standards were 1,600 square foot new building, it's about 239,000 square feet. Is that the number?
Yes.
You're showing up there? You're showing here 262,000. Now I know it's not a one-to-one match, but I think we just need to make sure people understand that that 60 encompasses some of the additions, I believe, that would be even in the plan that you
Yeah.
put forth.
Yeah, and I can speak specifically to those numbers. The 239 is from the state standards, the Georgia DOA standards. The 262 is from what we were ending up here on this site with the conceptual design. And there's some lack of efficiency from the way this evolved over time.
Absolutely, but
Yeah.
some of that 60,000 is represented in this plan. It's not 60,000 on top of 262.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
because I think you left the impression it's 60,000 more square feet than this proposed plan. That's not what the.
Correct, because even at the 1,200 student facility, we were getting over 200,000.
So I think for people that long-term have an understanding, they need to know what that net number is so they can understand what the cost is.
Correct,
Right
yeah.
now, because 60,000 additional feet based on your $500 a square foot for new construction would be an additional $30 million.
Yeah.
But some of that cost is already represented.
Yeah, and one thing that we're looking at is that when we're calculating the cost of the 1,200 student version, we're retaining more of the existing building and paying for renovation, yeah.
So let me just do the second. So the second part, this is the conversation, and I appreciate your saying where the district is now and openness. It's a point I've made before. The gym, the solution around the gym becomes a very costly solution. I understand. I brought the life safety issue up to the district when I was on the board, so I fully comprehend. But the real issue is that you need 26 feet width of access for life safety, and I would suppose also for staging and construction, because you gotta be able to get this stuff in there. And it worries me that, one, under the current plan, you'd have to take the gym down early, because you're not gonna be able to, which means that the school would be without a gym for multiple years. I don't think that's clear from the plan that's up there. And I think that's an important point for the community to understand. And then secondly, if you didn't take down the gym, you could acquire 26 feet of access, which is likely to be a lot less expensive than building a new gym. But if you take the approximate, I think the gym cost is about 12 million, and you take the 7 million that's renovation for building 5021, which is the old math building, that's about $20 million when all is said and done. And for $20 million, you could build, based on the estimates you use, a 40,000 square foot building. 40,000 times 500 is 20 million, which is why I sort of constantly remade the point. Now, I understand there's demolition costs, there's FF&E costs, but those are actually gonna be comparable, because even if you modernize the building, you're still gonna have fixtures, finish, and equipment costs, for those who don't know what that means. So I just think it becomes really important in this conversation that to understand the impact of, and I'm, as you know, I'm a solution of let's also fix the fields, which is more, I still don't think it's outrageously expensive. But just to get the 26 feet of access, which would negate the necessity of taking down the gym, whether we should take down the gym is a debate to be had, and would allow the redeployment of that money towards new space. And if you didn't modernize 5021, which by the way, has the most expensive square foot cost for renovation at 325. It's 2/3 of the way to actually building new space. All the buildings we're gonna renovate here, you look at the square foot cost that you projected, that building, which is, those of you who know me, I think should have been probably taken down 50 years ago when it was built, would be the most expensive space to renovate in this current plan, which suggests to me that there's a certain point, I know there's analysis of which you reach, you go over a limit. I have a construction expert seat behind me who does government projects, to me it makes much less sense to spend $325 a square foot on a building that's questionable as opposed to 500 square foot and to get the space in a new building.
Excuse me, it's really difficult to hear these conversations which are all facing forward. So perhaps you could suggest something so that those of us in the rear can hear the entirety of the comments that are made.
Yep, thank you, and I apologize for that. I guess we need a second microphone here, or I should have gave you the microphone so everybody could hear it. Do you want to, all right, so the whole thing was about cost and just different things that go into that. And again, and I appreciate what you're saying, there's still a lot more work to do, but it kind of still gives you an idea. And yes, how we're going to phase it in. No doubt, whatever you do on this campus, there will be a certain amount of disruption. Now, how long that disruption is and to what extent, we'll try to minimize, but the reality is it's going to be hard to do all that, and that, you know, when we get the contractors, we're going to have to figure out how to do that phasing. So the question about a timeline on that, again, you're looking at multi-year, all right, for one thing. We're probably looking 3 years at minimum of phasing, I would say. And depending on how much we go or what we run into, it could even run into maybe even a little bit longer by the time we're completely finished, all right? So there's a lot more costs that we have to increase in. And what you're saying, yes, I get it.
But my point
But
to
yes.
some people here is the gym, the impact of the gym, likely you would have to take the gym down early, which means there'd be no gym here for multiple years. And I don't think people fully understood that from the earlier sessions. And that's a problem. Hence, the question you asked that was sort of hidden in the first thing, is a gym important to a high school? Then when I went home, I finally figured out why that question was asked. And I think that would be a problem. And that, to me, the land solution, again, if we don't even do the comprehensive one, which we have talked about in order to get the field space right, to get 26 feet of access mitigates the,
It's actually 41 feet.
or even 41 feet. It's still going to be cheaper than building a new gym, but substantially, right,
26 plus the setback.
right.
And we, can I
Yeah.
say something?
Yeah, okay, just, well, and we wanted to look, we were really looking for solutions where we could keep the gym here. And at the corner of the gym, there's a stair. We were looking, say, can we take off the stair, leave the volume of the competitive gym to try to get enough space to get it to work? And it's 26 plus 15 because there's a 15-foot setback required. There's a chance we could get a variance to reduce the setback. That's not a guarantee. But we couldn't find any kind of solution that worked dimensionally. So
Variance from where? Because,
the variance is from the county.
okay, so the county's authority over the school district
But-
only goes to life safety.
This
Right.
is life
No,
safety.
no, I understand.
This-
So that if you had access elsewhere
Yeah.
through another corridor, the variance about, like they used to, like to have you not be on the property line.
Yeah,
We
but-
know this because we've been in, when I was on the board,
Yes.
we had this, we litigated
Okay.
this issue with cities. And the law is very clear that while life safety, because that emanates from the state, applies to us, so we can't have too small of a space to get a fire truck. The fact that the city or the county would prefer us to have a setback from the property line because it just looks nicer.
This is life safety.
Right, so again, finding an alternative that might be cheaper, which is finding another corridor into the property. That's the only point I was making. I understand the constraints you were given and what you said, but that's, I think, a compelling reason to look, because it would actually save money if you solve the problem the way I'm describing.
Okay, all right, we'll make
Just
this.
one more small point about different scenarios with keeping the gym, that if we put the gym up there on that chart with the renovation cost to keep it, especially the old part, that where music is, and the problems in the basement, those would be some of our most expensive renovation costs of the whole thing, because we have water coming into those lower basement levels, and the walls they're coming in through are under, they're shared foundation walls with this building. And so we can't excavate there. There's no daylight to come in and excavate to fix. And so it's an extremely difficult process to fix those foundation walls.
I appreciate that. Let's take one or two more here, and then we'll go to scenario 3. And yeah, what you're saying is great. I hope it also brings out the point of there's a lot of complex issues here that we have to address. There you go.
Has the district offered the church anything for that access? Has the district approached the church at all to see if that access can be purchased?
So we currently have an easement agreement on it, which allows that road, and we do rent spaces for that, parking spaces. But we have not, no, we have not, I have not approach them about purchasing their land, or even if they're interested in selling at this point. I think it is something that we can absolutely look at, okay, as an additional corridor. Okay. All right, how about we take one more and we'll get to scenario 3. So I know you had your hand up, so I want to.
I understand that the current number of students attending is a little over 1,400. So this proposal, if you don't add another building, is the high school not growing in numbers? Because I know that Fernbank has grown 150 students in about a year and a half. I'm not sure about the other places in the district, but what is the student enrollment proposed for, say, 5 years from now?
Thank you, and that's a great question. That's how we arrived at the 1,600. Our forecast out to 2030 put us somewhere close to that 1,600 number. Now, that's, again, about 6 years out, but by the time we would finish building anything, if the forecast was to be true, then we'll be very close to matching that number.
Why are we even considering?
You don't add space, but your numbers go from about 1,450 up to 1,600. That's an additional 150 kids, and I understand you already have floating teachers. Will you have enough space in, say, 5 years for 1,600 students if you don't add space in this proposal like the second scenario?
That's potentially a possibility we need to look at. Again, and I know that's a very vague answer. Okay, and this is where we're getting a little off track here with capacity, okay? Understand the Georgia Department of Education's, when they talk about 1,200, okay, that is for funding that's just how we help generate money and earning. And it's based on a ratio of approximately 19 students per classroom, all right? We know most of our students, or most of our classrooms, have more than that, okay? So when you start adding all that up, that's how sometimes you can arrange. Now, the real challenge is, particularly in some of these older buildings, is you have very narrow hallways. So even though you grow in the number of children, right, all the things outside the classroom become very tough, right? It gets tighter. If we were to go to 1,600 and we still keep buildings like this, you're going to see that even more, right? Because you're adding more students onto this campus itself. So the answer to your question is correct. Why we started off with scenario number 1 is because in 2022, that is what the board agreed to, was a modernization program of Druid Hills High School. And that's what we're directing to do. That's why that's scenario number 1. Why we've been having these meetings is exactly for all the comments we're hearing. Is it the right thing to do? Is it enough? Or what is enough, right? To get this up to where we need it, there's many ways to do things, all right? High schools have different programs, right? There's a lot of dual enrollment, so the actual number of children here at any one time could be different, okay? So there's plenty of things to think about, but it's really the overall design of the building and the campus that will really tell you how tight it is. But again, it's a very small campus. The more students you put here, the more you need for parking, right? More buses, right? More staff parking, right? And what you're doing is you're taking up more field space. So that's trying to find the balance, and that's what scenario 2 is all about. We're not saying it's right or wrong, but that's what we're going to be asking you for feedback on. Yep, go ahead.
Thanks, Chief Hofstadter. I think you just summed up why I stood up here. I want us to be clear about the purpose. We owe it to you to be able to explain what the different scenarios would offer. This is not, again, I'm clearly stating we haven't landed in a space, but we owe it to the vote that was taken, knowing that we can't, like, ideally, it doesn't make sense under that first scenario for us to be able to, we won't be able to move this school forward progressively the way we need to. But we have to give you all of the options. So bear with us as we walk through. We want to get to scenario 3 so we can talk through those spaces. But again, this is about conversation and thought, right? This is not when we talk about H-Pride, I want to be sure that we are reminded how we engage, right? The energy in which we put out in this space, we must stay connected and positive because we are really going to get into a space for real that's going to make sense for this community. And we have to take this step by step by step in order to get there. So just bear with us as we walk through. Thank you.
And I appreciate that too. Yeah, it sounds like you all were in our planning room when we first started this with the architects and we got the results back. It's the same conversation. That's why we said we got to share this with the community. And that's why we're here, okay? And it's funny because you're, not funny, but it's interesting because it's the exact same things we started saying once we saw the data. All right, what is to be here, right, and how? All right, let's get to scenario number 3. Again, this one was based on feedback from session 2 and some other conversations that we've had about moving the high school somewhere else, right? So let's talk about going to an alternative site. Now that again could be a swap, and we've heard swapping with Druid Hills Middle School, which we understand historically used to be called Shamrock High School back in the day, right? So it was already somewhat set up to be a high school. To be a contemporary high school, for something like to swap it, we would still need to do some work over there at Druid Hills Middle School, for example, because it would need some more of the things such as CTAE programs and all the things that were missing back when those things weren't part of the high school program, right? Again, to bring it to contemporary. So that can be done. Then the question is what happens with the Druid Hill Middle School children? Oh, well, if we swapped, then they would come here. Well, we still got to clean this place up, right? We still got to have air conditioning. We still got to do some project here. And again, to do that project, we're still going to be forced to move that gym, all right, at this point in time, okay, because we still got to hit life safety. There, I heard you, all right, at this point in time, right, with what we currently have under our property, all right. Again, we could look at a swap if we keep the high school as what we call a neighborhood school with boundaries. That's what DeKalb has historically called its neighborhood school, right? They have an attendance zone, and that's how they're categorized. Again, with that, we would still have to make sure we're meeting all the minimum requirements, not only there, but whoever would come to this facility, it functions and meets their requirements as well. So again, what we're saying is we're kind of in a whole new planning phase, okay? If we do a new build somewhere, that would require building from the ground up. We got to have property that we already own, and it's got to be property that's big enough and suitable enough to run a high school. And if we do something like that, obviously, we want to make sure we bring all the things that you've told us are important, the auditoriums, a full complement of CTAE, enough capacity, parking, athletic fields, right? Auditorium, the whole everything. So to find that kind of site, all right, we would have to do some work to see what is possible. All right, but again, in all those scenarios, 1, 2, and 3, we would still have to fix this facility, even if it was a middle school or an elementary school or any other program. If we're going to put children in here and we clean it up, we still have to do most of which you saw in scenario 1. Depending on the program, where you may not have to is maybe rebuild a gym if it's a special program that doesn't require a gym. And we could look at that, right? But we're not even there yet because this is the feedback we have. If scenario 3 seems to be the way to go, we would have to go and do a lot more work and start analyzing other spaces to come back with some options about what that might even look like. All right, just because it looks good when you first see things doesn't mean it works well. All right, there are limitations to every property. Okay, so that's where we are with scenario number 3. Yep, and then again, that's kind of where you see their stance. So we would like to get to those kind of levels. As you know, land is a premium in DeKalb County. All right, so I mean, we just have to really go and look. And that would open up a whole new venture of acquiring land, if need be, of different sites. So again, that takes time and it takes, resources and money, but also takes a lot of math and engineering to make sure that it might even work and be suitable. And that's going to give us some time there, okay? So on timelines, if we were to look at a scenario 3, again, it's going to take some time for our architects to go analyze a few sites that could be, do some math, and then come back with some ideas if that is the way we want to go. All right? I think that's where we are by feedback here. We'll take just a couple questions, and then I want to open it up and get you all out of here in honor time. Let's see, we'll start here. How's that?
So except for scenario 3, which would be a new site, a new build, and kids kind of stay where they are until the new build is done, have you given thought to what the disruption would look like to students in the first 2 scenarios if we have to take in consideration whether or not this will still be an active school while any construction is going on, how you plan to move kids around through the building, or if they have to go somewhere totally different until scenario 1 or 2 is complete.
Yep. Again, very good questions. And then once you decide on what you're going to do, then the question is, how do we do it? So we're currently doing a few projects right now that are active construction sites, and that's how we plan these things. Sometimes you may, if you have a place to put students, you might be able to move some or all. Sometimes we call that swing space, right? To move them off campus so we can get things done quicker. All right, but we know whatever we do here, it's probably going to contemplate bringing in modular units. We got to get them in the back set up somehow. We're going to have to look at a cafeteria space, temporary cafeteria and gym and all that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So is there disruption? Yes. But will there be a disruption in any of the scenarios? Yes. If we swap, then we're disrupting 2 schools, right? And we got to figure out what that looks like. All right, and see how that times up. But we can pretty much figure some things out. We just got to decide what our tolerance level is as a community of what's the best way to go about doing this. And that's the feedback we're looking for. Okay? Let me go up here, and then we'll come back. Yes, sir.
Yep, so I just had a quick question about the budget. So obviously, you're presenting different scenarios that have substantially different costs. And right now, as I saw like a few days ago, we still don't even have the budget for the basic modernization approved. So how long do you think it would take to get a $200 million budget or a $125 million budget approved? And when could we actually expect the work to start? Or even the $80 million.
Yeah, great questions. Good. Yeah, we got to invite you all into the planning room here because these are all the things that we contemplate, right? Again, so this was again decided back in 2022. We know that construction costs have increased tremendously in the last 2 or 3 years, okay? So the prices we're using are true market prices of what we see today. The longer it takes for us to get to a decision, I can't, just normal cost of everything going up over time, it's likely to be maybe a little bit more. We don't know that yet, all right? But this gives us an idea. More importantly, whatever we're doing, we want to do for the next 50 years. So this investment of money, we want to try, as we say in our world, we want to try to solve as many problems that we all agree are problems with the amount of dollars we have. So what yields that decision? Acknowledging that schools, particularly high schools, are pillars in the community that we all identify with. So that's where the value statement comes in. How much is enough, right? And what do we want for our children and the next couple of generations for the next 50 years? Because once we spend that money, it's gone. Now, where do we get the money? Yep. Our primary source of funding, and I'm getting there, but I want to make sure we understand some things. Our primary source is East Lost funds. So again, we appreciate those, by voting yes on that, on those referendums. That's our chief, that is our primary resource of funds. Our next East Plus, we're looking at a referendum, would be fall of 2026. Now, in there, whatever the decision is, it's most likely we would have to find more funding. And we could do that through a number of ways. East Plus is one, right? If the voters approve, okay? You could look at property bonds, GO bonds. There's different ways to raise that funding. But yeah, we have a saying, right? Vision without funding is a hallucination, right? So, but the important thing is the dollars we spend, we want to make sure we're doing what we feel is right for the next 50 years, because once it's in, it's in. So, the normal construction cycle, we're looking at hard planning of about 12 months, right? If we figure this out, really getting in and making permit plans, as we say, right, with all the little details and everything else, right about 12 months, okay? Then we have board approvals and permitting and things like that. In the meantime, we would get a contractor on board, start looking at things like phasing, and then all together that goes into what we call guaranteed maximum price. We are probably 14 months if we were to start today. All right, so that's already putting you now close to 2026. Construction for something like this could take 3 years in phasing for scenarios 1 and 2, and depending on scenario 3, it could take just as long, depending on which which approach is taken on that. So that gives you right up there where we're talking about for the next SPLOST referendum.
Would you start construction with like a basic understanding that you're going to be funding over a period, and then bring in the additional funds, or would it be like, hey, we have to set up a full kitty of $125 million for the maximum of what we see from a contract value, and then start?
Simple answer, no, we don't want to do that. Because in order for us to have a project with a contractor, once we start, we have to make sure we have full funding in order to go through that. If we start prior to any kind of SPLOST referendum and it doesn't pass, we would still be on the hook to paying the rest of it, and then you're getting into different things such as property tax bonds and all this other stuff, right? So generally, we don't want to sign that contract until we know we have committed funding. And really, the state won't approve it either unless we know we have committed funding for it. Okay. How about we do one more, or maybe one or two, right? We go this way? I'm sorry. Here you go.
So the ESPOS was approved previously, and there was money set aside from that previous to do a modernization of Druid Hills High School, excuse me. And then in 2022, it was taken back from us. We were supposed to have this, and the board voted, correct me if I'm wrong, the board voted to put us on the back burner. We didn't deserve this. And this is how we came to the video that went viral and to the 50 million upgrades in the painting and whatever they did to, put some lipstick on the problems here. Why should I vote for the ESPLOST again? What kind of guarantee am I getting from the board that you are not going to take this money away from our school yet again? A Title I school that deserves to have the instructional facilities that other schools in this district have.
Yeah, you want to answer?
Yeah, I'll take it.
All right, I'll let you address it.
I'll tell you this. There's been some unique decisions made, right? In the past.
Before you were here.
Before I was here, before Chief was here, before the board members were here, right? That they're sitting here, and there's so many things that a lot of things that occurred, right? And so we are working to, as we try to move this district forward, we know we have to clean up the past. And this is why we have brought something like the structure of student assignment planning forward, so that these decisions can be made with the community voice at the center. And there's a whole different strategy in which you can commit through the eSPLOST process. If you look at how SPLOST 5 funds were committed versus SPLOST 6, that was a different strategy. And so with that, it allows us to stay the course. Now, I can only speak to the most recent $50 million that the board approved. That was to address the issues that had came out from the video and all those other pieces. We are now in a position with this that all students in our district deserve high quality educational facilities. And so we are making commitments. While I can't speak to the board, I can't speak as the superintendent. I have to, it's recommendations that go forward. The board only votes on recommendations, right? And so they can't take something away if it's not brought forward. And they've been very passionate and committed to making sure we get this together. This is why we've made a huge commitment to being in these spaces consistently and getting that data. So I would say, I know this is probably funny to say, but we have to trust our process, right? That we are really working to get this right, and that this is not a for show. We have so many projects moving forward. We want to be sure that we get this one moving in the right direction and solidify. And back to the funding, it is definitely not best practice to make the commitment without securing the funding. So we want to be sure if we decide to move forward after entertaining and engaging with our community, if we go with any of these scenarios, we only have $50 million that was approved. So we have to get the additional dollars through a SPLOST, more than likely, eSPLOST. And so we are committed to really getting this right. So I understand the community's concern, but we are really doing this because we want to get it right.
Even if the current board members Am I right?
Once a board commits to those contracts, that's the will of the board. But again, I think what we're all finding, construction it's almost a 5-year process, folks. These conversations start now, then we get into hard planning, then we actually get into construction. A board term is only 4 years. So many projects that we're doing now were made by board members and decided by board members that weren't even or are not on the board any longer. But that's because they vote on the will of the community. They represent the community. I'm gonna let them talk to you directly on it.
All right, so I also was not on the board then, just so everybody knows. I'm just speaking for myself, okay. No, but in all seriousness, so part of what we are dealing with all across the district is astronomical inflation in construction prices. So yes, we have 50 million committed to Druid Hills High School that has been approved by the board. That is your money, if you want to think about it that way. We don't want to do a half-ass $50 million project here. But that means minimally we have to find 50 million more. And so my question to you is, what other school's project gets cut so that we can fully fund this one? And that is what we are dealing with all across the district. Cross Keys is also in my district, and the modernization for it was originally budgeted at 60, and we are at 79. Okay, it was budgeted at 80 million, and we're up to 125 million. But they didn't get cut. They did. So they were an East Blast 5 project, and they are now having to dip into East Blast 6 so that we can make them fully full. We're already saying, well, guess what? Druid Hills is going to be first in line for East Blast 7 to try to make you fully full. Like, this is not anyone picking on Druid Hills High School. And I am the representative for Druid Hills High School. And what I am telling you is that this is an issue all across the district. How many projects were we going to do with ESSER that we now cannot do?
We did, I believe, 18.
So we have 18 schools that were promised either roof or HVAC renovations through ESSER funding that has now expired. Okay, so we have 9 that were not done of 18 that were originally conceived. And so these are very hard decisions. And, you know, it's not any fault of anyone here. A lot of these budgets were made before he was hired, before I was on the board. We are having to clean up the mess of what came before us, and we are trying to do the best that we can to make whole as many communities as possible, but it's not good news. I mean, the financial picture for how much money we have in East Blast versus how many projects we want to be able to do, the math just doesn't add up. And so you have 50 million, that's not enough. A lot of other schools have buckets of money that also is not enough to do their projects either. And so we are in a position where, and one of the things that the board did and the superintendent brought forward to us is we are now taking money out of the general fund to put into a capital improvement fund so that we can start doing these projects faster. But what is that taking money away from? Right? So it's tough. You're all looking at me like I'm a horrible person. But I mean, I'm just being real, right? And what I want you to take away from this is these are hard decisions. We are doing the best that we can, and no one is picking on Druid Hills. Like, this is a district-wide issue that we are contending with.
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis, for that. And then I would just say this too. The other piece, when we talk about a mess, we just had a global pandemic that just hit us. And the increase for construction is up what percentage? About 35% more. So projects that the board approved 5, 6, 7 years ago cost now 30% more than what it was when they projected it. So this is how we're getting in these situations regarding that. That's not, no one could really control that. We were moving a certain way. We've just done the audit, right? You've probably seen that the audit findings. There's no craziness that has occurred in that besides the cost escalation and also a couple of processes, but it was really locked in on this inflation that really just blew us out the water. And so now we have to position ourselves differently to try to get these things done. And so our goal is still to, the commitments that the board made prior, we still want to get these things, we're still going to get it done. We had a whole project of a school that we decided to not do in Dunwoody. We totally eliminated it. And Cross Keys Middle School. We eliminate those projects, but Druid Hills is still on the radar. We're still in this space, and we're still trying to lift that. And so I don't want to get too far ahead, but I'm going to turn it back over to Hofstadter. I think Ms. Pierce, I'm sorry. The vice chair, don't get me.
I'll let you live, it's okay. And good evening, everybody, and thank you. Whitney pretty much said everything that I could possibly say, but to your question about what could the board just arbitrarily just take something away from you, how many of you all remember revolving door leadership? Raise your hand if you remember that. How many times have we had someone at the top and we've had to change it multitudes of times? This has stopped. We have Dr. Horton here now. Not to say that he's the be-all, end-all. However, we have, okay, keep your feet on the ground. But the good news is that we are cohesively working together for you. Each one of you, all across this district. When we say we're going to do something, we're going to commit something, trust me, we've had some sleepless nights many times. We agree, we disagree, but we're not disagreeable. We are looking at some things that should never have happened, frankly, honestly. I want you all to think about that for a second. Maybe tomorrow you might get the understanding of where I'm going with that. When you have to go and do cleanup, you do that. Some boards, some districts shy away from that. We are not doing that. I want you all to look at me, watch my mouth. We are not doing that. We're committed to this district, to every school, every parent, every child, and ourselves. We're holding ourselves very high on the accountability ladder. We're not going to disappoint you. If something happens that's out of our control, we'll let you know. We will not hide our heads in the sand. Another thing, very quickly, with boards, when you hire someone, you let that person know what is working and tell that person to continue where we left off. You don't let them come in necessarily and throw the baby out with the bathwater, as many people like to say. We don't do that. You tell that person what's working. Okay, we're partially done with Druid Hills. Finish it. And that's what we mean. So hold us accountable because we're holding ourselves accountable. And I do mean that sincerely. So thank you all so very much.
I'm joking. All right.
All right, thank you all. Hey, look, we're going to do more, but in the interest of time, because I know some people watch, I'm looking at you watching your watches here. Let me go ahead and get some feedback, but I do want to remind you before we start on that, we do have an email address set up, dcsdbuilds@DeKalbSchoolsGA.org, all right? DCSDbuilds. Please email us, because as you go tomorrow, you're probably going to think of things after all this marinates a little bit, right? Please email us, let us know your thoughts. We do read those. Jay, raise your hand. So Jay's our guy over there. He looks at everything that comes across that website. We will not share your information, your personal information, but we will share what you write to us with the whole team so that we can take that into consideration, right? Thank you, Jay. There you go. Thank you. Yep. So again, when you do write that, please put in there DHHS modernization in the subject line so we know which project. We have over 130 projects we're currently tracking. So please just put that in there so we know which one we're referring to, okay? A few more Slidos. So if you got your phone out, just based on what you have right now, okay? We're just going to take you through a couple questions here, right? So here we go. Let's just recap the 3 scenarios, okay? And again, these are based on the original discussions, right? Maximizing outdoor and athletic space, okay? Student and staff parking. These were all issues, again, that you shared with us, okay? Co-curricular spaces, right? Theater, CTAE, vocation, as some people refer to them as, okay? All right, so we're looking at that, all right. So here we go. Again, if you join us at www.slido.com, that's www.slido.com. Again, let me clarify. I'm glad you said we're not voting here. We just want some feedback. You just kind of give us a scale. So it's 1 to 5, right? You're going to see a 1 to 5 scale. 1 means you don't feel it really supports it in any way. That would be to your satisfaction. 5 means, yes, 100% meets my expectation. So anywhere in between. Did I say that right? Yep, that's it.
Does that scenario meet the question? How well does it meet the question?
How well does it meet the question in your point of view? Okay? All right, so go ahead. I think we're responding now. Okay, do you want a question while you're doing that?
That 200 million for the 3rd scenario, does that include the cost of necessarily modernizing this space that also has to happen?
Probably not to the extent that we need it to, depending on which site we go to, right, and how expensive it is to do there. But I think once you start hitting those kind of numbers, that's what we were looking at. When you start hitting 200 million, that's a lot of money for a lot of projects. Not that it's not money worth well spent. We just got to make sure, is it well spent in the lens of the district, right? District-wide lens. Okay? I think we got some going there. We'll take some more while everybody's going through.
This might be a question others were thinking, I don't know if it's possible, but when you were going through the funding scenario, it seemed like it was all public funding. Can you do private funding as well? And I'll say, I know Emory, a lot of people have commented on how vital this is to their recruiting and their campus, this high school. Has anybody spoken with the Emory leadership for any maybe help that they can provide?
Generally, we stay with public funds. Not to say we're not willing to take some private money, but it would take a whole lot of private money, as we can see, but every little bit may help. We have not had any kind of real conversation with Emory regarding this property at this time, because it's just our property. But be that as it may, we know we need to clean these buildings up. Okay, so Jay, can I go to the next one? Okay, there you go. So you can kind of just start seeing what we're looking at here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? Just kind of give you an idea where we're at. We'll go to the next question. It'll still keep adding up for question 1. Is that correct? Why we do that? Jay, it'll go forward? Okay. Let's give you a chance there. Looks like it. All right, let's hit to the next one. All right. Going to parking. Just want to let you all know that we are getting your feedback. Some people say you always ask us and then you throw it in the garbage. No, we don't do that. We look at everything, and I want you to see this, which is why we're doing it, because that is what we're seeing. Again, we'll post all this in a few days on our capital improvement project website. You will see a link there for Druid Hills High School Modernization Project. All this material will be on there. Just give us a few days. This is being recorded, so if you'd like to go back and watch it, that'll be up in just a few days too. Thank you to our DCS TV team for coming here and doing that for us. And you can also go and watch prior meetings that we've had. Okay, we'll keep going. Now we're talking about classroom space. I'll go ahead and give you the mic.
In terms of funding, is DeKalb County talking about or planning to opt out of Amendment 1? The property tax homestead exemption, the amendment that just got voted in?
I'm going to let one of our board members answer that question for you.
So we will be holding the required public hearings the beginning of next year. 3 are required for our school district to be able to opt out. We are getting 3 new board members in January, so it will kind of be a new board to decide, but the current board has, as of our last meeting on last Monday, authorized those public hearings. So we are making moves towards opting out, but we will hold the public hearings, and like I said, it will be up to the 4 of us who are staying on and the 3 new board members who join us in January to make that final decision.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll keep going on, and please give us your feedback here. We'll keep answering questions.
All right, so with the timeline that you put out, the 12 to 14 months, it seems like it's quite a point from here to even where that begins. So talking about with the video and such and the issues that were brought up with that, I want to know kind of like where the state of the school is with those repairs that our kids are going to be coming into or are currently in, are going to be experiencing for the next 3 years before anything substantial even begins to get done. And the other question is, that I have is, why hasn't anybody asked the church? Instead of putting it out, well, maybe it's a possibility. It's real easy to find out if the church is interested or not. And then you can take that off the board or actually speak to it.
No, and I appreciate that, all part of the process. Yes, anytime we do a construction project, we have to continue to maintain what's there as long as our children occupy that and our staff occupies. There has been quite a bit that has been done here, including painting. But I want you all to think about this. Now that you've seen the scenarios, you realize why there hasn't been more work done. Because as soon as you do any of the heavy items, you have to get a permit. In order to do a permit, we're right at scenario 1, if that makes sense. So that some of those, what we think are cost-efficient repairs of maybe only $1 million, rapidly turns into 80. So and that's how permitting works, right? We have to bring everything up to code. So there's been a lot of maintaining. There's been a lot of painting and things of that nature, and we'll continue to do that, okay? Right now, everything works, but again, you got a 100-year-old building with a 100-year-old infrastructure in many cases. Things are going to break, and we're going to fix it, and that's what we've been doing, okay? Again, keep going to scenario 2.
So another question related to timing. I know that once you all get to a point of decision and funding, the clock starts at about 14 months to gear up. But what is your timeline and process to get to a decision and scenario?
Yeah, great question. That's why we're doing these meetings right here. Again, I want to remind you, we're still talking about this because I really, and I appreciate y'all being here, okay? Because I think you're seeing that we need to be very deliberate about what we're doing, and we need to make sure that we're hitting all the input that we need so that we spend the right dollars. So what do we anticipate right now? We're going to go back. We're going to take all this data. We're going to look at all 3. We're going to continue to have some other meetings. We're going to talk more with the elementary schools as our plan. We're going to talk with the middle schools. We're even looking at the possibility of an all-virtual meeting, okay, all virtual to help others who maybe can't get here. And that way we can get more feedback. We anticipate that to happen well after the first of the year. So right now, probably a few more months, okay? But what I always say is we're going to go as fast as we can, but as slow as we need to go in order to get it right, okay? And we want to make sure we have enough input to our satisfactions where we can make that informed decision and make a recommendation in a very, very difficult vote, right? To make sure that we are doing right with the best information we have, with the best set of values that we've determined. Okay? Okay. You want me to hold on that one for a second? Okay. What do you need me to, what? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. I got you. I'm sorry. Okay. We'll take some more as we're doing this. Okay, here you go.
I know we didn't get into detail on this with the second option, and of course not with the third, but I really only heard you discuss phased approach while the students are on the campus. And I'm wondering if you've sort of taken into account how that might drive enrollment drop as families look at sending their kid to a high school where their entire 4 years would be spent under construction, and what the long-term implications for the district are with that enrollment drop.
Yep, lots of things to consider. Again, our families, we'd offer what we can, but families ultimately make those decisions. We will provide a safe way to do it. The reality is for some students, it might be 4 years of some type of construction on their campus. We are seeing other schools going through that right now where it's a few years. We try to minimize it. We try to get in there as fast as we can, make sure it's safe, right, and get it done. But yes, and that's part of the phasing. Well, that's what we would have to look at. Like I said, our first thing is figuring out what the project here is going to be. And then we'll look at, based on those different scenarios, then we'll look at how best can we do it. And we'll keep you all informed along the way, and we'll keep having meetings to let you know that. But as you can see, every choice we make is going to have some kind of impact. Okay? Right now, we don't have anywhere to put 1,500 high school students. Okay? Okay, we'll keep going here. Is that right? This one? All right, so this is now scenario 3. Okay. I think we had a question back here.
Hey, so I work at Druid Hills High School, and one of the conversations I had with a colleague of mine was about this situation of moving schools, and one thing that came to mind in our conversations was possibly, like, what about a swap between Druid Hills High School and the DeKalb DeKalb Elementary School of the Arts, or it used to be Avondale Middle School, because there's already an athletics field at Avondale, or the previous Avondale Middle School, which is now the DeKalb Elementary School of the Arts.
Yep, and I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, obviously, we have not done anything in earnest, but we do, based on feedback, we've been looking at different alternative sites. Again, there's several schools. I think you brought up, was it the DeKalb Arts Academy, the former Avondale Middle School. Is that a possibility? It could be. We'd really have to do some math and some engineering. But then we got to say what is best moving forward too, right? We talked about Druid Hills Middle School, right? And there might be some other options we haven't seen, okay? So like I said, if that's where the direction where we're heading, then we'll go ahead and we'll push some math down in there and some engineering, come up with some pretty rough order estimates on what is possible and what that might look like. Again, whatever we do, we want to try to solve as many of these wants, right, with the dollars we have. Excuse me. Yep, okay. All right, keep moving. Yes, sir, I think we just got a couple more here.
So you mentioned solving the wants with the dollars we have. My only concern is that if you walk away and think, well, scenario 3 had the most 5 stars, that's what we actually want.
Right. Yeah, that's not what we want.
It's not letting me vote on the things that I care about.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care.
Understood. Again, we're not asking you to vote now, okay? We're just asking you to rank how well, in your opinion, it meets, okay? Now, I understand. That's right. But that's the decision. You know, if you stay here, what you got and what you're giving up. Just about under many of the different scenarios, of the combinations here on this campus. By going somewhere else, you may or may not get it all either, depending on where it's at. We're basically going off feedback from what we've heard. Again, we're not voting on anything. All we're doing is saying, is there a notion? But if you're telling us how well does that meet, yeah, we'd have to come back with some sites, and it sounds like that's what we need to do, if that's what you're asking. No. Okay.
No, we don't want it.
That's fine. And remember, the feedback we're getting will be in the context of all the different data points, and we're going to come back and share it with you, okay? I understand what you're saying. No, I get it. I acknowledge it.
Does DeKalb currently own property that would reach that 30-acre site preference? I'm just curious if any of the existing land that the county owns would meet that size.
In the vicinity of where we're currently at, it would be close, but we would have a few sites, potentially. But again, now if they're being occupied, right, And we got to do something with that.
I'll ask
Okay.
the question.
You want to be more specific?
What are they? So the Briarcliff High School site, how big is it?
Oh, the old Briarcliff, that's right, about 28, 29 acres. Yeah. Okay.
Just curious, I mean,
The Briarcliff next to Adams Stadium, the big field there, right? That's what they call the old Briarcliff High School site. Just keep in mind, it's further north, right? And if you remember in our past discussions where most of the students live, right? They're on the east and the southern part that currently attend here. So you're taking them further away from your school. So it's not necessarily a no or anything. Just understand every site will have its advantages and disadvantages. Okay? All right. Let me see here. We got a couple more. Anybody? Oh, we haven't heard from you today. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, because I wasn't at the first two meetings, and this may be old news, but why wouldn't they tear down the old elementary school part that's kind of in the worst shape and then build like a multi-story classroom building over there? If the architects could talk about that, like just a quick overview of that scenario.
Yep, I appreciate that. Just point of reference, all that information is on the website if you want to go and you can see it all. In order to meet the DOE modernization program, that building actually met the requirements as it currently stands. So in order to kind of stay within that framework of budget, or that estimate, right, that we were given, that's the best scenario we have at this point. Now, can and should, that's what all these scenarios are based on, right? Okay, great question though. All right, I think we're about done there.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think for us to effectively evaluate scenario 3, we'd have to know, like, one, where's the map and the footprint of the alternative sites and what specifically, like, which alternative sites you're looking to do. Because, like, if it's gonna be 15, 20 miles away, I don't know that that's gonna necessarily work.
All right, great question. Let me just say, because we didn't ask this, but maybe I should ask it right offhand. How about just a show of hands? How many people really want us to explore moving this campus? Because understand, I got to do some time and resources of really looking into that. All right?
I think if it's a scenario, then you have to.
That's what we're looking at. That was right. Yeah, well, we would try to stay within the current attendance zone somewhere. We do need a school in this area. Okay? I can't really tell you because some of them, while they may look like they're an option, may not really be a better option because they have their challenges as well. Yeah, you want me to name things? Is that what you're asking? Or? Well, I think we named several. Yeah, we have Briarcliff, the old Briarcliff High School. Yes.
We don't know what's actual or feasible or what is, we don't know what you want.
Yeah, we don't yet either because we haven't dove into that. That's where we're trying to get to. My thing is this, what are we doing with this site?
Okay, hold on. So, within the current Druid Hills cluster footprint, there is the old Briarcliff High School site. There is the current Druid Hills Middle School site. There is the old Avondale Elementary, which currently serves DeKalb Arts Academy. There is the old Avondale High School, which currently serves DeKalb School of the Arts. All of those are between 20 and 30 acres, so they are double or more the size of the current Druid Hills High School property.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I thought we named them all, but yeah, we just don't. I'm just telling you, we just don't know how well they work. Okay. Yep. All right. For interest of everybody else, we're done here, but I do appreciate it, and we're going to continue to come back. This isn't the end of it. All right. This is just where we're at. But again, let us look at everything. We'll come back and we'll keep talking with you. Okay.
Show of hands for 1, 2, and 3.
I think this is helpful. I think it's helpful because I feel like a lot of us are kind of cornered in just selecting 5 on scenario 3 because those are things, and I feel like that feedback is going to make it look like people in the meeting felt differently than we really did. Yeah.
I totally acknowledge. That's why when we come back, we're going to analyze the feedback and maybe we can move the conversation forward. But again, Folks, these scenarios are based on what the prior meetings have told us.